Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org with a video tutorial for the new Boston. In this video we're going to be looking at the fade to functionality in jQuery. And this is going to allow us to fade any element either upwards or downwards with a specified opacity to that actual opacity. So in this example we're going to be using images, and I'm going to use a particular image that's already available in my root directory, and that's tartan.jpg. And initially what we're going to be doing is on a click of this image we're going to be fading it to a particular opacity. So we're going to be fading it to say 40% opacity, which is 0.4 in CSS. So it's the same, essentially it's the same thing as if you were to set an opacity to a particular element in CSS, but we're using jQuery to animate it as well. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is just include this image on my page. So we use obviously the image tag, and that's tartan.jpg. I'm then just going to assign a class to this, which we're going to use to handle the click event, and I'm going to call this fade to. So obviously when we do this in jQuery, we're going to be able to fade any image with the class fade to. Let's just take a look at how that looks on our page. You see that we've just got the image here, not really doing anything, it's static. Okay, so I've included ext.js as my external JavaScript file, and obviously I've included jQuery because we need to make use of its functionality. Let's go over to ext.js and start to try this out. So the first thing I'm going to do is wait for the document to be ready, and we create a function inside of here, and all our code is going to go in between these brackets here. So I'm just going to pull that down to make it a little bit easier to use and read. Now what I want to do is set an event handler for any class that has the fade assigned the class fade to. So we go ahead and select this using a dot for class selection and fade to. Okay, so now I want to create an event handler, and that's click. And again, inside here we need to go ahead and create a function, and I'm just going to pull that down a bit. Okay, so once fade to has been clicked, we want to go ahead and fade this particular element, the one that we've clicked, to a certain opacity. So I want to go ahead and reference this as this, because this applies to the current element that we've assigned the fade to class to. And I want to say dot fade to. Okay, so now that we've done that, we need to talk about the parameters that this is going to take. It will typically take 3 parameters, the first being the speed, the second being the opacity that you want to fade to, so this would be from 0 to 1 or anything in between, and then we have the option to use a callback function on the end. So let's go ahead and look at it in its most basic form. I want to fade it at a speed of 100 milliseconds, so obviously that's 0.1 of a second. We could have a second, for example. We could also use textual representation of the speed, like slow, normal, or fast, and that will give you the same sort of effect, but we're going to be using 100. Now I want to fade it to 0.4, and that's our 2 parameters that we're required to give. So let's go ahead and check this out. Let's refresh. I'm going to click on the image, and you can see that the opacity in 100 milliseconds has faded to 0.4. When we click it again, nothing's actually happening because we're trying to reassign the opacity to 0.4. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's take a look at a callback function. So I'm going to create a function on the end of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that down. Now, when the animation is complete, i.e. after 100 milliseconds, this is when this callback function can be called. So for example, I could alert animation complete. Let's go back to our page. When I click it, you see that we get this dialog box after the animation has completed. So what we're going to be doing now is, I'll just get rid of alert. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be creating some kind of small, not really application, but some kind of nice functionality to fade out all other images when a particular image is clicked, or hovered over or something. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of this altogether, this just here. And what I want is when an element with the fade to class has a mouse over it, I want to perform a particular action. And what I want to do is I want to bring the opacity of a particular element, or the particular element that we've selected, up, and all the rest I want to fade. So in order to show this example a bit more clearly, I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this image. So with ext.js, what we can now do is, well, essentially what I want to do now is I want to set the opacity of both of these images to something before we begin. So just up here before the fade to mouse over event, I want to go ahead and set .fade2.css, and the CSS option I'm going to use is opacity, and I'm going to set this value to 0.4. So now that we've set that initially, you'll see that when we refresh, both these elements have an opacity of 0.4 because they both belong to the same class, which is fade2. Now when I mouse over a particular element, I want it to fade in. So I can go ahead and say this.fade2, and I want to fade it to 100% opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and do this at a speed of 100 milliseconds. I want to fade it to an opacity of 1, which means it's fully visible, and then I want to use a callback function, and what this callback function is going to do is it's going to set every other image on the page to essentially going to set every other image on the page to a 0.4 opacity, because as we roll over each image, the opacity will now be stuck at 1.